Arizona Territory. 1879, the sun had barely cracked the eastern ridge when the cowboy realized his Colt .45 was gone. Along with the woman, he had offered a blanket and a fire the night before. Yates Bridger stood over the cold ashes, squinting at the tracks leading away from his camp. Bare feet. Small, fast. He let out a low breath, not quite a laugh. "She stole my gun," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "And maybe a little more than that." He had met her just the night before, half-starved, dirt-smudged, and swinging a rusted kitchen knife like she meant it. She had come stumbling out of the brush as dusk fell, clutching a bundle wrapped in worn cloth. Two little girls clung to her skirts. One no more than 6, the other maybe 4. "I ain't here to hurt you," Yates had said, hands up, voice low. "Campfire's warm. Got beans and bread." She had hesitated. Her eyes, green and sharp, darted from the girls to his saddlebags. She had dark hair, tied back in a knot that had mostly come undone, and a line of blood dried down her right sleeve. "I do not need your help," she had snapped. But the younger girl had started crying from hunger right then, and the older one was trembling. So she had finally sat stiff and silent while he ladled beans into tin cups and passed them over. He had not asked her name. She had not offered it. But he had noticed her watching him, not with fear, with calculation. Now, the morning after, she was gone. So was his Colt. And the bundle she had carried the night before was still burned into his memory. 2 children, abandoned by whatever hell she had run from. Yates clicked his tongue at his sorrel gelding and swung into the saddle. "You better hope she did not get far." Calla Sutton gripped the revolver with both hands as she moved through the canyon, the girls trailing silently behind. She had checked the chambers. Loaded. She had no idea how to shoot it properly, but if they found her, those bastards from Red Creek, she would not go down easy again. "Keep quiet," she whispered, crouching near a boulder. "We will rest here." The older girl, Violet, nodded. The younger, Vera, curled against her side and closed her eyes. Calla brushed dirt from their cheeks, her heart thudding so loud she swore the walls of the canyon could hear it. She had not wanted to steal from that man. But he had been too kind, too calm. She had not trusted it. Kindness always came with strings. But when she had taken the revolver from under his saddle blanket, she had hesitated. Because something about him, his steady way of handing her food without looking at her too long, the way he had offered the last of his coffee to the girls, had made her chest ache. Still, she had done what she had to do. Yates found her tracks again by noon. The prints were hurried, weaving through the rocks, but he had ridden cattle drives through worse. He dismounted, crouched near a bend, and found a scrap of cloth snagged on a branch. He was not angry, just determined. "She took my gun," he muttered to himself. "And my heart, maybe. I will take them both back." He paused, glancing ahead toward the mouth of the canyon, "or marry her for them." He said it half in jest, but when he said the words out loud, they stuck in his chest like truth. Calla saw him before he saw her. She raised the Colt, hands trembling. The girl sat beside her, hollow-eyed and quiet. Yates stepped into the clearing, leading his horse. He stopped when he saw the barrel pointed at his chest. "You do not know how to shoot that," he said calmly. "I do not need to," Calla replied. "Just need them to think I can." "I am not here to take it back," he said, hands out to the side. "Not unless you want to give it." She narrowed her eyes. "Then why follow me?" He took a step closer. "Because you left before I could ask your name. And because I think you are running from worse than me." She said nothing. But the Colt lowered an inch. Yates crouched beside the girls, offering a canteen. Vera took it without hesitation. Violet passed it to her sister after a sip, then looked up at him. "Is he going to hurt us?" she whispered to Calla. Calla's throat worked, but no words came. Yates answered instead. "No, ma'am," he said softly. "Not ever." They camped together that night. No fire, just blankets and silence. Calla watched the girls sleep, then looked across at Yates. He sat with his back against a rock, hat low but eyes open. "I left Red Creek 3 nights ago," she said finally. "My husband died in a mine collapse last spring. His brother took us in. Then he started, looking at Violet wrong. Yates did not speak, just listened. I grabbed the girls and ran. Thought I could make it to Prescott, but I do not know the land. I did not mean to take your gun. You did what you had to," he said. "I do not steal," she said quietly. "I know." They fell quiet again. Then she asked, "Why did you follow us?" He met her gaze. "Because I do not let someone walk off with my heart and my colt without at least offering a trade." She blinked. "A trade?" He nodded. "I will take them both back, or marry you for them." Her breath caught. He smiled just a little. "I am serious." "Why?" "Because I want to protect you," he said. "And not just for a day, for good." She stared at him a long time, then she said, "Ask me again when we are out of this canyon." "All right," he said. "But I will not stop meaning it." Calla lay down beside her daughters, heart pounding in a different way now, and for the first time in weeks she slept without fear. By morning they were moving again. Yates rode ahead, scouting. He showed Calla a better way west, through a pass only the locals knew. She walked beside the girls, quiet, watchful, but her shoulders were not as tight when they stopped for rest. Yates handed her the colt. "You should keep it," he said. "But I will teach you how to shoot it right." She looked at him. "You trust me?" "I do." Calla took the gun, her fingers brushing his. She did not let go right away, and neither did he. The wind picked up out of the south as they crested the ridge, bringing with it the scent of creosote and mesquite. Calla pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, watching as Yates scanned the land ahead. His hand rested light on the hilt of his knife, his rifle slung across his back. The girls walked close beside her, their steps quieter now, more certain. They'd been traveling west for 3 days. Each evening they made camp just as the sky turned lavender, and each morning they rose before the light touched the rocks. Yates never pushed too hard, never made them feel watched, but he was always near. He rode at their pace, never ahead for long, and always circled back to check the trail behind. That day, as the sun dropped low and the hills cast long shadows across the scrub, they found a dry wash hemmed in with cottonwood trees. Yates dismounted and knelt near the bank, brushing away loose grit with his fingers. "Fresh water under this," he said, glancing back at Calla. "Ground's damp, see?" She stepped closer, crouching beside him. "Could we dig through?" He nodded. "A little elbow work and patience. Won't run like a creek, but it's clean." Calla looked up at the cottonwoods. Their leaves rustled high above, catching the last of the gold light. "This place feels quiet." "Too quiet?" he asked. "No." Her voice softened. "Safe." He stood, brushing dust from his pants. "Then we'll stay the night." Violet helped gather dry branches while Vera curled beside the saddle blanket Yates laid out. Calla knelt by the shallow pit he dug, cupping water into the tin basin as it pooled up. Her hands were red from rough travel, her knuckles split, but she worked without pause. When she brought the basin to the girls, Yates watched her from across the fireless camp, something unreadable in his eyes. Later, when the stars had come out and the children were asleep, Calla sat on a flat rock, turning the revolver over in her lap. Yates sat a few feet away, sharpening his skinning knife with slow, practiced strokes. "They're different now," she said softly. He didn't look up. "The girls," she nodded. "They don't flinch at every sound, they don't whisper in their sleep as much." His knife paused. "That's your doing." "No," she said. "It's yours." Yates set the blade aside. "I just showed them a trail. You're the one who carried them through it." She traced the edge of the revolver with her thumb. "I've been trying to remember the last time someone stood in front of me instead of behind." "You don't have to remember," he said. You just have to know it's true now. Calla looked toward the dark hills. When we get to Prescott, I'll find work, maybe a boarding house. I can sew, cook well enough. He shifted, folding his hands between his knees. You plan to do it alone? I've always had to. She glanced at him. You don't owe us anything. I'm not offering out of debt. She met his gaze. Then what are you offering? A place beside me, not behind, not beneath. He paused. You said to ask again when we were out of the canyon. Calla was quiet for a long while. The fireless night wrapped around them, and the only sound was the wind moving through the cottonwoods. I still don't know what it would mean, she said finally, to stand beside someone. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Then let me show you, day by day. No rush. No demands. She looked at the revolver in her lap, then at the girls sleeping close together under the blanket. I've got 2 lives to think of besides my own. I know. He tilted his head slightly. You think I don't? Calla's mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close. You'd take on all 3 of us. Already have, he said. You just haven't said yes to it yet. She stood slowly and crossed to where the girls lay, tucking the blanket higher around Vera's shoulders. Then she turned and walked back to where Yates sat. She held out the revolver. He looked up at her, brow furrowed. She shook her head. Not giving it back. Just letting you know I don't need it between us anymore. He took it gently and set it aside. Then he reached out and took her hand. She let him. The morning sun pushed through thin cloud, casting a soft light across the basin as they broke camp. Calla rolled the blanket tight, her movements practiced now, each knot pulled firm. She said nothing as she worked, but her hand brushed Yates when he passed her the spare canteen, and she didn't pull away. Yates kept his voice low as he tightened the saddle cinch. There's a ranch a ways north. Belongs to a widow named Granger. She runs sheep, mostly. Lets folks lodge in her barn when the weather shifts. I helped her mend a busted fence last winter. Calla tilted her head. You think she'd taken a woman with 2 children and a man with no clear claim on her? Think she'll see what's plain, he said. We're heading that way either way. Storms coming off the hills. You feel it in the wind, she nodded. Smells like snow. Vera, still blinking sleep from her eyes, climbed onto Calla's hip. Violet held tight to the hem of her mother's skirt, her expression set. She hadn't spoken much since the second day, but she watched everything. They rode in silence for a stretch, the land widening out into rough grass and thorn brush. The wind had teeth now, tugging at the girls' bonnets and lifting dust that settled in the folds of their clothes. Yates slowed the horse when the ground dipped, letting Calla and the children keep pace. You always ride alone? She asked without turning her head. For years, he said. Didn't seem lonely until I had someone to walk beside. She didn't answer right away. Then, you mean me or the girls? Both, he said, his voice even. They passed an old windmill, half rotted and leaning. A hawk circled above it, tracing wide, lazy arcs. Calla adjusted Vera's shawl. I used to think the world narrowed down after a man died. Turns out it just shifts. Yates looked at her, then ahead again. You want to keep moving after Prescott? Maybe. Her voice was quiet, but not alone. The wind picked up again, colder now, and Yates pulled his scarf higher. We'll reach the Granger place by nightfall if we stay steady. Calla nodded. By late afternoon, the gray sky had begun to sag lower, and the wind turned sharp enough to sting. Yates spotted the split-rail fence first, half buried in dry grass, and beyond it the low-slung barn with a lantern swinging from the eave. The woman who opened the door wore a thick wool shawl and had a shotgun resting casual in the crook of her arm. She studied them for a long moment before speaking. You're late in the season for travel, she said. Her gaze moved to the girls. They yours? Calla stepped forward. They are. Yates took off his hat. Ms. Granger. I helped with your east gate last February. She narrowed her eyes, then gave a short nod. "Bridger, you didn't talk much." "Still don't," he said. Her mouth twitched. "You got coin, some," he said. "We'll work for the rest." Granger looked at Calla, then at the girls. "You know sheep. I can wash, sew, cook, and mend. I can learn sheep." The older woman nodded once and stepped aside. "Barns dry, cots in the loft. Water pump out back." That night, after the girls were fed and asleep under quilts, Calla stood just inside the open barn doors, watching the snow begin to fall in thin, slanted lines. Yates stood beside her, arms folded. "I never thought I'd feel still again," she said. "Not just safe. Still." He looked at her, then out at the darkening yard. "We don't have to keep running." "I know." The silence between them wasn't heavy, it was quiet in the right way. She turned to him. "You still mean it? What you said back in the canyon?" "I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it." Calla stepped closer, her voice low. "Then I'll give you an answer." Yates waited. "I won't give you back your gun," she said, "but I'll trade it fair." He raised an eyebrow. "What's the price?" She didn't smile, but her voice was steady. "My hand." He didn't touch her yet, just looked at her like she'd handed him something too valuable to hold without care. "All right," he said. "I'll take that trade." Calla's breath left her slow, like something had loosened inside her chest. She reached for his hand, and this time she held on. The snow came gentle through the dark for hours, leaving a hush over the land that held even the animals still. By morning, the world beyond the barn was blanketed in white. It sat thick on the fence posts and softened the hard lines of the scrub, turning the sparse Arizona basin into something near beautiful. Inside the loft, the air was warmer than it had any right to be, close with breath and wool and the slow comfort of sleep not stolen by fear. Calla woke to the sound of a kettle settling on hot coals. She sat up, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek, and saw Yates crouched near the hearth grate, easing steam from the spout with the back of his hand. He hadn't noticed her yet. His focus was on the task, not the watcher. She came down the ladder quiet, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. The girls were still asleep beneath the quilts. No nightmares, no flinches. She moved to the stove, her voice low. "You always up this early, Habit," he said. "Sun's late, but work ain't." He poured her a tin cup and passed it over. She held it close, letting her hands warm. "Mrs. Granger said the sheep need turning out near the lower ridge. Wants to keep them off the drifts," he said. "Said I could take her dog with me if I don't mind him thinking he's in charge." Calla sipped. "You going out alone?" "Not unless you plan to come. I've never walked the back of a sheep." "Then you're overdue." She smiled, faint and surprised, then nodded. "What about the girls?" "I asked Granger if they could help her card wool," he said. She said yes, long as Violet minds her hands and Vera doesn't get into the dye pots. Calla looked over at them, still curled together. "They'll be fine." Yates pulled on his coat and glanced at her. "You don't have to come." "I want to." By the time they reached the lower ridge, the sun had pushed through the cloud cover in pale strips, lighting the snow like sugar over stone. The sheep moved slow and stubborn, and the dog, a rangy black thing with one torn ear, nipped at their flanks with practiced precision. Yates moved beside her, boots crunching through the crusted snow. "You walk like someone who's had to run too much." Calla kept her eyes on the sheep. "That's not something I've ever heard a man say. You've never known men who watched close enough." She didn't answer right away. Her breath came in clouds, and she kept her hands tight around the wool mittens Mrs. Granger had loaned her. Then she said, "I used to think I had to keep moving to stay free, but maybe I was just trying to outrun being seen." Yates bent to fix a broken bit of fence wire, his voice low. "You're seen now." He stood and looked at her. "And there ain't a thing in you I'd change." She blinked hard, then turned her face toward the ridge. I never expected to be wanted with all the pieces I've got. I don't want pieces, he said. I want you. The dog barked then, sharp and urgent, and Yates turned just in time to see a ewe break toward the brush. He gave a quiet curse and jogged after it, leaving her standing there with her heart thrumming like it had been dropped into her own hands for the first time. That night, back in the barn, the girls lay abuzz from helping Mrs. Granger. Violet had dyed her fingers blue and Vera had gotten her apron caught on a nail, but neither had cried, and both had eaten every bite of their supper. When they finally drifted off, Calla sat on the edge of the loft with her feet dangling, watching the barn lantern swing slow from the rafter beam. Yates sat below, mending a torn saddle strap, his shoulders easy in the firelight. She called down, "You meant it." "What you said, every word." "I've never had a man say things like that and not expect something back." He set the strap aside and looked up at her. "I don't expect a thing, but I'll wait as long as it takes." She climbed down, slow and sure, and stood in front of him. "You already waited long enough." He didn't move, just watched her, quiet as always. She reached for his hand and placed her fingers over his. "I've carried too many names that weren't mine. Wife, widow, trouble. I'd like to be yours now." His voice was steady. "Then you are." They stood there while the lantern swayed, the snow still falling soft beyond the boards. No rush, no need for more words, and when he leaned in and kissed her, it was not a question, it was a promise. The wool shed smelled of lanolin and straw, and sunlight filtered through the high slats in long golden bands. Calla stood beside the sorting table with her sleeves rolled up, her hands deep in warm fleece. Mrs. Granger had shown her how to twist the fibers just so, testing for brittleness. Her fingers moved slow but certain now, learning the difference between fine and coarse by feel alone. Outside, the wind had softened, and the last of the snow was melting in thin rivulets off the eaves. The Granger place sat quiet in the lull between storms, and every part of the land from the sloped pastures to the woodpile near the porch felt like it had settled into a kind of waiting. Yates passed by the open door, heading toward the corral with a coil of rope over his shoulder. He caught her eye as he went, and his mouth curved, not in a grin but something steadier. Calla looked away, not from shyness now, but from the ache that came when something good settled too deep in the chest. Mrs. Granger worked beside her, sleeves damp to the elbow. "You learn quick," she said without looking up. "I've had to," Calla replied. "There wasn't time to be slow." The older woman nodded once. "You staying on then?" Calla paused. "If there's room." Mrs. Granger brushed a strand of gray hair from her temple. "Room's not the question. Want's the thing." Calla didn't answer right away. Across the yard, Violet was helping Vera stack kindling into a narrow bin. They worked like they'd been born to it, quiet, focused, side by side. A week ago they jumped at every creak in the floorboards. Now they moved like they belonged. "I don't know if I know what want feels like," Calla said. Mrs. Granger gave a short hum. "Well, when you figure it, best not to wait too long to reach for it." That evening, after the supper dishes were dried and stowed, and the girls had gone to bed with their knees still dusted in ash from the morning's firewood, Calla stepped out behind the barn. The cold was easing and the sky had cleared to a thin scattering of stars. Yates stood near the fence rail, whittling a small block of cedar. The shavings curled at his feet like pale feathers. "Is it for them?" she asked, nodding toward the shape cradled in his palm. He looked up. "Vera asked for a rabbit. Violet said she didn't need anything carved, but I'm making her a comb." Calla stepped closer. "They've never had anyone make them anything just because. They've never had anyone stay, either." She reached out, took the cedar rabbit from his hand and turned it over in her fingers. The grain was smooth, the ears just slightly uneven. "I think I figured out what I want," she said. Yates waited. "I want a place that doesn't end when the weather turns. I want someone who doesn't leave when the trouble's already passed." His voice was low. "You've got both." She looked at him then. "I want to marry you." Yates didn't smile. He breathed slow and deep, like something inside him had been holding still too long and finally let go. "I've been waiting to hear that from you," he said. "I'd have waited twice as long." She took his hand in both of hers. "I know." They married 2 days later in the Granger kitchen, with Mrs. Granger standing witness and the girls holding wild sage in place of flowers. Calla wore a pale blue dress she had stitched from a bolt of cloth left in the barn's storage chest, and Yates shaved for the first time in a month, though he nicked his chin and didn't bother to hide it. The vows were simple. No grand words, no promises they couldn't keep. Just the truth, spoken steady. When they kissed, Vera clapped and Violet looked down quick, pretending not to grin. That spring, they moved into the small cabin at the edge of the lower pasture. It had been empty since the last hand moved on, and Yates spent 2 weeks patching the roof and mending the chimney. Calla planted beans and squash in the narrow bed behind the house, and Violet helped her line the rows with small stones. Yates built a cradle for Vera that summer, though she was past needing one, and they used it to hold wool scraps and dry herbs. He carved their names into the lintel above the door, C and Y. Bridger, in letters so careful they looked printed. By winter, Calla had taken to sitting on the porch steps in the late afternoon, knitting rag socks from leftover yarn. Yates would come in from the ridge with wind in his hair and his shoulders full of dusk, and the girls would run to meet him, their boots scuffing the packed dirt path. He'd lift Vera into the air like she weighed nothing and let Violet tie the horse's bridle with her careful hands. Inside, the fire would be going. The kettle would hum, and when the door closed behind them, the world would feel whole. They never spoke much about the road they'd walked before. Not because it hurt, but because peace, once earned, didn't ask to be explained. Calla kept the revolver. It stayed wrapped in oilcloth at the back of the cupboard, not because she needed it, but because it had been the beginning of something. A choice made in fear that led, somehow, to grace. She and Yates slept close every night, his arm always around her waist, her hand resting over his heart. They didn't say, "I love you," often. They didn't need to. It was in the way he poured her coffee before his own, in the way she mended his shirt cuffs with the same thread she used on the quilt. Years passed. The girls grew straight and sure. The land held them and they held each other, and nothing was ever taken from them again.